Hi there. Welcome to Oaklandside 510. I'm Tasneem Raja, editor-in-chief of the Oaklandside, your independent nonprofit newsroom. Later in this episode, a new city budget, private money to fight illegal dumping, Oakland Unified's budget gap, Donald Trump joins Oakland's fight over coal, a giant, rare, occult book collection needs a new home, your Juneteenth event guide, and more. But first, a beloved Oakland tradition is under threat, and organizers say false and misleading narratives are to blame. Our arts and community reporter and our public safety reporter join me to break it down. Before all of that, here's a word from a local organization supporting this podcast. The Women's Professional Basketball Association season is on, right here in Oakland. This is one you don't want to miss. The WPBA is the nation's leading professional development league, featuring elite basketball talent with games every Saturday and Sunday in June. Games are held in a venue where every seat puts you close to the court, the athletes, and the action. Plus, tickets start at just $35 and cover a full day of games. That is a deal you can't beat. Come be part of the WPBA community. Get your tickets now at womenspba.com. Okay, let's get into our main story. This week, we're talking about one of Oakland's most beloved traditions, First Fridays. For 20 years, it's turned a stretch of Telegraph Avenue into a monthly street festival with art and music and food and families filling the block. For lots of Oakland residents, First Fridays is quintessential Oakland. If you've never been, we have amazing photos in a recent story on our site. The link is in the show notes. But lately, the festival has been fighting for its future. A big part of that fight is about a story being told about First Fridays that organizers and supporters say just isn't true. I'm joined by two of our reporters who've been digging into this. Azucena Rasilla, our arts and community reporter, and Roselyn Romero, our public safety reporter. Azucena, Roselyn, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having us, Tasneem.
Thanks, Tasneem.
Azucena, let's start with you. So for anyone who's never been, what is First Fridays?
So the festival started back in 2006 as a casual, unsanctioned gathering of artists and people. Over time, it grew into a more popular event, and in 2012, it became an official permitted festival run by the neighborhood group Koreatown Northgate, which most people know as Kono. Mm-hmm. And the spirit of it has always been the same. It's a free, family-friendly festival. It's a place for local artists and vendors to show their work, for food vendors to sell, for local dancers and musicians to perform, for the community to just come out and be together once a month.
Mm-hmm. And it's at a real crossroads right now. What is happening?
So a lot of it comes down to money. Sponsors have been pulling out, and Vanessa McGee, the festival's director, says First Fridays is at risk of shutting down for good if they can't find a sustainable source of revenue. She connects some of the sponsors leaving directly to how the festival has been covered in the media. Companies see headlines tying First Fridays to violence, and they get nervous, even though these episodes of violence happen after hours, after the event ended, or at different locations.
Mm-hmm. Okay, this is the thread I really want to pull on here. Roselyn, you've been reporting on where that narrative comes from and whether it holds up, whether it's accurate. What have you found?
So the core issue is this. Over and over, when violence happens downtown, late at night, on the first Friday of the month, news coverage ties it to First Fridays. But when you actually look at the timing and the geography, it doesn't hold up. The festival itself ends pretty early. Vendors start setting up in the afternoon. The event wraps up before 10 at night. And within an hour or two after that, vendors are gone and the street is fully reopened. But the incidents getting linked to First Fridays are happening hours later, after the festival is over, and often blocks or even miles away.
Okay, can you give us some examples of those kinds of incidents?
Sure. There was a deadly shooting at a downtown nightclub this past March that got tied to First Fridays. But that shooting happened 6 hours after the festival ended, and it happened downtown, not where the festival is held in Koreatown Northgate.
Mm-hmm.
The festival happens up Telegraph Avenue, and that nightclub shooting was on 14th Street in downtown away from the festival.
Mm-hmm.
In May, there was a fight outside a corner store at Telegraph and 24th. And then hours later, a car crash over on 18th Street that injured several people. Again, after the event had ended and away from the festival. If you go back even further, there were shootings last spring that some coverage linked to First Fridays, but those shootings were miles away in East Oakland. There were shootings last fall, too, that happened in the early morning hours, again, well after the event wrapped up.
So I know the spokesperson for the police union has been part of pushing this idea that the violence that's happening is directly related to First Fridays, right?
That's correct. Sam Singer, the Oakland Police Union spokesperson who posts a lot of critical content about the city online, claimed that at least 6 deaths have happened after First Fridays over the past couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
When I asked him about these posts, he said these were his personal observations, not an official message from the police union.
Okay.
But when you go to the sources, that number, 6 deaths, isn't really supported. The article he pointed to didn't even mention those deaths. And after the shootings last fall, Mayor Lee said OPD hadn't found any connection between the festival and the violence. The Oakland Police Department later confirmed that. Vanessa McGee, the festival director, described the coverage as, quote, clickbait. Her point is that anything that happens in Oakland on a First Friday somehow gets pinned on First Fridays, even though the festival is a family event in one specific neighborhood and the late night crowds downtown are a totally different scene.
Mm-hmm. Roselyn, you've also found a second narrative running alongside this one, and it has to do with young people.
That's right. There's this idea that has taken hold recently that teenagers are taking over the streets and causing chaos around First Fridays. You see it in viral videos and the comments under them, and in some of the local TV coverage as well. It fits into this national, quote, teen takeover storyline that's been all over the news in cities like Chicago and Washington, D.C. But experts I spoke to pushed back hard on that framing. One youth advocate with the Family Violence Law Center, which is based here in Oakland, told me it's misleading to say young people are driving the violence. For one thing, she said no one actually knows the ages of the people in these videos. A law professor who studies this said the coverage tends to demonize Black and brown kids for using public spaces in a way we don't see with other groups of teenagers, such as white kids at a skate park.
I know you've also talked with some of the young people who, go out on First Fridays themselves.
Yeah, I did. And what they said was pretty grounded. A couple of them helped out at a recent town hall about that festival. Their basic message was that the news shows all the bad and none of the good, like families just out enjoying the nice weather. And they were honest that a lot of Oakland teens don't have many safe, age-appropriate places to go to on a Friday night, which is part of why they end up downtown. A few of them talked about Oakland needing more activities for teens, like boxing, as one example, that gives them structure and positive role models. That lines up with the research, which shows that having safe public spaces and things like summer job programs can actually bring down violence.
So what is Oakland doing about all of this?
I kind of mentioned this earlier, but earlier this month, there was a town hall where city leaders came out to show their support for the festival. The mayor, the council member whose district covers First Fridays, and the interim police chief attended. They pushed back on the negative media coverage, but they also pledged to deal with the late night violence that happens on Fridays, as well as on many other days of the week. Their plan leans heavily on enforcement. More police and code enforcement staffing, closing off streets to traffic, and bringing in the city's violence prevention staff and MACRO, which is the civilian response program.
Mm-hmm.
Vanessa McGee, the First Fridays festival director, had a pointed take on that meeting, though. She said that it was really about the city laying out an enforcement plan for the downtown and uptown area, which she sees as completely separate from the festival itself. And when I went to First Fridays in June and stayed late, I did see a noticeably heavier police presence after the festival. I saw officers moving through the area in the early morning hours to prevent crowds from forming as well.
Azucena, let me come back to you. The festival has always run on this pretty fragile mix of funding, as I've learned from your reporting. And now we're hearing these narratives that are scaring sponsors off. Can you walk us through the money? What does it cost to put this on and who pays for it?
Yeah, so the organizers say it costs tens of thousands of dollars to put it on every single month. That includes several $1,000s just for private security. That money comes from a few places like company sponsors, community donations, grants, and the fees that the vendors pay every month. The city also kicks in a small amount of in-kind support each year to cover things like police services and some of the permits. There used to be more city support. The city once ran a grant program that helped fund free events like this one, and First Fridays was one of the recipients. But a lot of the city's broader cultural funding was cut in the most recent budget, so a real lifeline disappeared. And that hits the team too. Vanessa McGee, the director of the festival, told me that they used to have 4 employees, and now it's basically down to her and one part-time person.
Wow. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about the sponsors. Do we know who has left and why?
So McGee wouldn't name the companies that backed out, but she said some of them told her pretty bluntly that they didn't want to be associated with what they called, quote, a party in the street kind of vibe. She says that what the media has portrayed has nothing to do with what the festival is actually about. One of the most consistent past sponsors was Airbnb, and a spokesperson for the company confirmed that they're not a current sponsor, but they wouldn't say why. Some sponsors, though, continue to support and they truly believe in the festival's mission. For example, Toto's Cantina has been a sponsor on and off since June of 2025. Chris Cheeseman, the co-owner of the restaurant, told us via email that the festival organizers have been, quote, great partners in the efforts to revitalize Uptown. He said, quote, now more than ever, they need our support and we're standing by them. As a vendor and a neighbor, we see their commitment to community and safety, which is what Oakland needs.
Okay, bottom line, is First Fridays going to make it?
Honestly, it's an open question. The organizers are busy planning the next one, but Vanessa McGee, the festival director, was clear that if more sponsors don't step up or if they can't raise money another way, those plans could change. The thing she keeps coming back to is just how many people walk through the festival every month. It's tens of thousands of them. If everyone gave $1, she said, that alone could change where they stand financially.
Azucena, Roselyn, thank you both. This is really important reporting on something a lot of Oaklanders really care about.
Thank you for having us, Tessy.
Thank you.
You can find both of their stories at oaklandside.org. And if you want to support First Fridays directly, we'll put information on how to do that in the show notes. Let's get into more recent reporting from our newsroom. There's more in the full stories, which we will link to in the show notes, and you can always find at oaklandside.org. Sign up for our daily newsletter if you want to get this reporting in your inbox. First up, Oakland has a new budget. Last Friday, the City Council approved a spending plan for the fiscal year that starts July 1st. City Hall reporter Eli Wolf has the details. The budget avoids layoffs and does manage to pay for things like new fire engines, emergency shelter beds, safe parking for people living in RVs, tree pruning, and the city's film incentive program. I mention these items because some were in limbo when voters rejected the parcel tax Measure E, that the mayor and the council had been counting on for tens of millions of dollars a year. How did they fill the gaps? The council pulled together money from savings on vacant positions and other sources. How are people feeling about this budget? Council member Zach Unger summed it up with a play on last year's so-called, quote, nobody's happy budget. He called this one the, quote, nobody's crazy budget. Still, there is a clear loser this year: police oversight. The budget cuts the police commission's funding by nearly 12% and trims more from the commission's investigative arm. Police accountability advocates objected, arguing the city is defunding oversight even as it spends heavily on police and gets closer than ever to escaping federal oversight. Here is a related story from Eli and our news editor, Darwin Bongram. Just a week after voters rejected Measure E, that parcel tax, a private foundation is stepping in to pay for something else that the tax would have funded: the fight against illegal dumping. The Crankstart Foundation, started by billionaire investor Michael Moritz, who's very involved in San Francisco politics, is now giving Oakland more than $9 million over 3 years to clean up and prevent illegal dumping. The money will more than double the number of surveillance cameras the city uses to catch dumpers and pay for deeper police investigations into repeat offenders. Mayor Lee has increasingly leaned on private donors to cover services that the city can't afford on its own. Over at Oakland Unified, education reporter Ashley McBride reports the district has made real progress on its budget crisis, but it's not out of the woods. Last fall, OUSD was facing a deficit of around $100 million for next year. After painful cuts, the district has shrunk that by about 2/3, but a gap of roughly $38 million still remains. Much of that is driven by the rising cost of special education, which districts are federally required to provide. The school board has to adopt a budget at its meeting on June 24th, and members will still have to figure out how to close that remaining gap, possibly into the fall. In better news from OUSD, also from Ashley McBride, after a year of uncertainty, the district is committing to keep its school-based violence intervention program going for at least another year. The 4-year pilot placed teams of violence interrupters, life coaches, and gender-based violence specialists in Oakland high schools. It was originally funded by the city's Department of Violence Prevention, and that money was set to run out. Earlier this month, the district put out a call for organizations to staff these teams at 11 high schools next year. The nonprofit Youth Alive has already secured grants to bring back some positions, including life coaches at Skyline and Castlemont. The program has been credited with reducing suspensions and chronic absenteeism. Now to a fight over coal. Eli Wolf reports that East Bay Assembly member Mia Bonta is pushing back on a Trump administration plan to fund a coal export terminal in West Oakland. Earlier this month, the president announced tens of millions of dollars to help build the terminal, which would ship coal from Western states overseas to Asia. This week, Bonta introduced a bill that would require a fresh environmental impact study before a project like this could move forward. She argues that the existing review is more than a decade old and doesn't reflect what's now planned or the latest research on the health risks of coal dust. Bonta says she doesn't want Oakland to become, in her words, quote, a dumping ground for toxic chemicals. Congresswoman Latifah Simon is also fighting the plan in Washington. Here is a story for the book lovers from housing reporter Natalie Ornstein. In the East Lake neighborhood, a longtime bookseller named Todd Pradham is facing eviction from the rent-controlled apartment he's lived in for 2 decades. That apartment doubles as his library. It holds thousands of rare and antiquarian books on esoteric and spiritual subjects, a collection he is now listed for sale because he may have only days to move if he loses his case. Pradham has spent decades not just selling books, but running a literacy program that has brought books to homeless youth, foster homes, and shelters around Oakland. Natalie's story is a moving read about one Oaklander's life with books and the hard choices that a housing crisis can force. Our arts and community reporter, Azucena Rasilla, spent a day riding along with Oakland Animal Control. The result is a vivid look at one of the city's smaller, lesser-known teams. Just a handful of officers handle every animal call in Oakland, from injured wildlife to reports of cruelty and neglect. On the day that Azucena tagged along, they rescued an injured seagull and ran calls across East and West Oakland. The story also digs into the strain that the team is under. They are short-staffed, the shelter is over capacity, and the department recently lost a rescue partner after disturbing discoveries at a Humboldt County facility. It's a window into important, difficult, often emotional work. I really recommend you read Azucena's full story. From our Nosh team, a feature by Tony Hicks about an Oakland nonprofit that has become a national leader on an issue most people never think about: the food that is served in American prisons. The organization, Impact Justice, produced the first national study of prison food, and its work is the basis for a book called Eating Behind Bars. On Saturday, the book received a James Beard Award, one of the food world's biggest honors, in a special category for food-related media. Impact Justice is also running hands-on programs, including indoor farms inside women's programs, and an effort that has delivered hundreds of thousands of pounds of fresh produce to incarcerated people. Finally, a programming note. Today is Juneteenth. Azucena Rasilla has a guide to celebrating around Oakland, from a festival at Prescott Market to a celebration at the Oakland Museum, day parties, and a Juneteenth-themed Oakland Ballers game. If you're looking for something to do tonight, the full guide is on our website. All right, that's it for headlines. We'll link to all of this reporting in the show notes. That's this week's episode of Oaklandside 510. You can find all the stories we talked about today and all of our other recent reporting at oaklandside.org. Sign up for our daily newsletter to get our reporting delivered to your inbox. This episode was produced by Mark Nieto. On behalf of our entire newsroom, thank you for showing up for Oakland. We'll see you next week.